H.K. Lee is the founder of Aeon Woods Green Cemetery, which is a nonprofit working to establish the first conservation natural burial cemetery in New York's Hudson Valley. A lifelong environmental advocate, her path to natural burial was shaped by a passion for climate action, independent research into death and dying, and her South Korean cultural perspective on remembrance and care for the deceased. HK, welcome to the Dying to Know More podcast. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.
So in doing my homework, I'm going to say I'm very humbled because you seem extremely smart. Smart and ambitious. And I was just kind of like, wow, and she's done this and she's done this, which leads me to your path to doing what you're doing, which is somewhat unusual. You're a visual artist, you're an entrepreneur, you're a former private equity executive, and you've performed climate-focused work, and now you're the founder of this nonprofit conservation cemetery. How did we get here, and what are the common threads that kind of bind these all together, if there are any?
You're being more generous than warranted, but I really appreciate your comments. I would say I feel like I've been kind of stumbling along a little bit, and I feel like with a lot of people, you kind of make certain decision points as opportunities or perhaps desires kind of present themselves to you, and you kind of make decisions, and in some ways you kind of get to a certain point and you look back and you're just like, oh wait, like my interest in climate science and in science in general, as well as my experience starting and selling businesses, like all of those things have culminated in being able to feel confident and being able to go after this new project. And so it kind of makes sense after the fact, but during the time it made no sense.
Do you ever like look back though and you're like, how did I get here? And then you do look back and you see
all the time.
Yeah. Do you? Okay.
All the time. I'm curious about lots of people's paths and how they end up doing what they're doing, but it's usually the most fascinating amalgam of like experiences and like passions and capabilities, that kind of. I mean, I imagine you probably have a similar story too.
Well, which I mean, ultimately too, like I think as you age, you naturally kind of lean into the things that you're drawn to more, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. Like Absolutely. You just kind of. I mean, I think that's kind of a human tendency. So you immigrated to the U.S. from South Korea when you were 8. Is that right?
That's correct. So my parents moved here. South Korea was under a military dictatorship at the time in the 80s. And, it's a pretty typical immigrant story to just be like, you know what, there might be better opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah.
We can work hard. And they worked a lot of kind of, working class jobs and kind of wanted to create a better situation for my brother and I.
I've read kind of in your backstory, though, that when you've gone back to Korea, that your family's roots extend back more than 30 generations on the same land. Like, are you meaning like literally on the same land?
Quite literally, yes. I mean, definitely within the same area. People have spread out because obviously if you think about 30 generations of people, they've moved away or, have kind of migrated a little bit. But for the most part, we've all been in the same area for, it's about 1,000 years.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And we'll go back and visit kind of like the first named ancestor from like 1,000 years ago and visit his grave. And it's like this giant mound that is, continuing to be upkept.
So how does having that sort of sense of intergenerational continuity kind of impacted the work you're doing with Aeon, or informed it or inspired it?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like I kind of took it for granted. For most of my upbringing and kind of like anytime I went back to Korea, it was interesting because we spent so much time visiting graves, and I, like in my teens and 20s, I'm like, I don't want, I don't want to climb that mountain the whole time. But now I definitely have a much deeper appreciation for it, especially with friends that are seeking out their ancestry and taking the time and effort to visit, the Eastern European countries or wherever, to be able to get a glimpse of some of their past in a way that I feel fortunate to not have ever questioned it. We have an encyclopedic volume of books, that
Yeah.
kind of like outline our history. There's like writings from my ancestors, there's portraiture, there's all this stuff. And for me, I think I had in my younger days kind of rejected it because it's very paternalistic,
Yeah.
and I had felt kind of left out of it.
Yeah.
I think there's been self-correction in the more recent kind of generations where they're including, the women into the family trees.
Yeah.
But, to your question, I feel like there is a version of appreciation for intergenerational kind of continuity, as well as respect for your elders and where you come from,
Mm-hmm.
that exists in that particular way in my family tree. I think what I'm looking to do with Aeon Woods is to kind of translate that to a set of values that makes sense for me and our current generation. Like one of the biggest values for me is, greenhouse gas emission,
Yeah.
stopping that and making sure that we're leaving this place better than how we came to it.
Yeah.
It's a tough topic, right? And
Yeah.
so is there a way that I can kind of combine, some of that lineage and that kind of thinking and reverence and turn it into something that is personally more meaningful to me?
Yeah. So in terms of making the leap from private equity to conservation cemetery, what's been like the most surprising or shocking or scary or startling or, emotional impact so far?
That's a great question. I feel like the reason that I've worked in private equity, or the reason that I kind of chose to stay in it once I found it, was that I really enjoy the mess of problems
Mm-hmm.
that you have to untangle and figure out and get things done. And there's
Yeah.
like such a concrete satisfaction to being able to, look at the 20,000 puzzle on the floor and be able to like put it together
Mm-hmm.
and have a concrete outcome. Very different in what I'm trying to do now in working within a nonprofit structure, working with state and local government, with a land trust, as well as, just figuring out how to get support in community.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a much slower moving
Mm-hmm.
beast. Just
Mm-hmm.
as many pieces of puzzles, I think,
Yeah.
but
I was gonna
it's
say.
less. Yeah, it's less explicit. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if I've put the right pieces together yet, and
Yeah.
it'll show itself eventually. But yeah, the pace has been one of my biggest challenges.
So for somebody who's hearing about Eon Woods for the first time, explain your vision. Like, what are you trying to build?
Yeah, yeah. So there fortunately are many options that are kind of coming about nowadays as it relates to end of life choices, of
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like, you have the very conventional, the burial in the concrete vault and a fancy casket. You have that. You have the cremation, and then you have some innovative ideas that have been coming through with aquamation and human
Mm-hmm.
composting and other things that kind of accelerate um, uh, the human end of life choices. And so I would say with conservation burial, there is a combination of being able to make a choice where you're respecting land, where you're inviting in the ritual, as well as just kind of a holistic, humanistic version of how you can go, and be choosing something that is the only carbon net negative way to have your final choices. With Eon Wood specifically, I'm trying to do this in urban or relatively metropolitan high populous areas. And the reason for that is one of the arguments for cremation or all the cremation alternatives is that land should be used for other things,
Right.
of which my argument is actually we need open space, we need conserved land, we need to respect the fact that land is it is the reason for life, right? Like
Right.
it's where all of our oxygen comes from,
Yeah.
it's where all of our food comes from ultimately.
Right.
And so how can we put a focus on that and respect
Mm-hmm.
land and, steward it forward? and do it in areas where land is expensive, quite
Yeah.
frankly, and in high demand, and still make, you know, make a concerted decision to allocate that land for this purpose and to fully fulfill just kind of what I think is a meaningful way of looking at the cycle of life.
So, for people who may be unfamiliar with the region, you're trying to create this space in the Hudson Valley region of New York. Where
Yes.
is that? What area does that entail?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it is about where I'm looking right now is about 90 minutes out of New York City. So if you go
Okay.
straight up out of New York City, Hudson River is one of the rivers that goes along Manhattan.
Mhm.
And you're just going straight up, and you can get there by train, you can possibly get there by boat. I guess technically you can
Take a
get there
river.
by boat. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
river. I
Yeah.
don't know how long it would take, but yeah, trying to, and it's just such a beautiful area
Mhm.
where a lot of people choose to go for hikes, and there's lots of arts organizations and a lot of ecology organizations as well. So,
That kind of makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So why, like, you could have simply been an advocate for green burial or, more eco-conscious options, but instead you're wanting like the whole enchilada. So why is creating that actual space so important to you?
yeah. I think along the way, I am an advocate and I am participating in a lot of
Yes.
conversations
Yeah.
to help the movement forward. I feel very, you know, I know some of this is being naive and that I've never done this particular type of business before, but I
Ignorance is
feel
bliss. Ignorance is bliss.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Go for it.
With the last business I sold, I was like, I'll never start another business. You just don't know. You don't
What
know
you
what
don't
you
know.
don't know going in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, However, I feel so passionate about this that I think it's worth the headaches and the
Hmm.
heartache, and I feel like there's just we're progressing the conservation cemetery creation. Although there's a lot more, in creation now. There's
Hmm.
20 plus, I guess, right now, since the first one opened in the 90s.
Hmm.
It's just not going fast enough,
Hmm.
and I feel like people are creating them in locations where they live, whereas I think I'm someone that's kind of approaching it at a systematic level of just being like, okay, let's find the biggest city. I
Yeah.
happen to live, in New York, so that helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's prove out this model, and then let's see if we can replicate it in other kind of metropolitan and high density areas.
So to your point though, like back to, it is unusual to try to do this in a high density place. Like we have a place called Larkspur here where I live
Oh,
in
I
Tennessee.
love Larkspur.
But it's pretty far out. It's like maybe
Yes.
an hour and a half from Nashville, which I guess isn't as
Yeah.
far, but New York is more sprawl than spread out than
Right.
Nashville. Um, is there any component to this that's like we're running out of cemetery space? Like, I mean, it's as to why it's unusual to put one of these in an urban place. Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking like urban place, there's not enough space for caskets and burials. So now maybe that's why there's so much more, like maybe people are trending more towards cremation, but do they have to? No, they don't have to because we can do this. Like does that play
Yeah.
any component in all of this?
It's a great question. There's two kind of angles to this. One
Okay.
is I'm trying to help normalize renewal of grave
Hmm.
spaces, which
Okay.
means reusing, a grave space after the person has fully decomposed.
Hmm.
There's three cemeteries that are doing that currently,
Hmm.
two in Virginia and one in Maryland,
Okay.
of which I'm looking to kind of renew the graves every 75 years, which
Hmm.
is the lifetime of the person. If you think about like 18-year-old HK visiting, my ancestor graves in Korea, like that won't be directly possible, you know.
Yeah.
However, if someone passed away like within your lifetime, you have the full 75 years to go visit. Is kind of the thinking behind that
Okay.
timeline.
Okay.
Although full decomposition should be completed in 10 to 20 years or whatever according to the various papers. So so that's one component of it, where you're being very intentional and selective about how you're choosing to use the space you do use as graveyard. And the second is there are lots and lots of abandoned cemeteries across the country, of which in New York, I can't remember if the figure is 700 or 900, but I've been to a lot of Division of Cemeteries meetings, which is the state-run kind of department that oversees cemeteries in New York. And there's constant discussions
That
about...
is a large amount of abandoned cemeteries.
And so that's an opportunity, in my opinion. A lot of them are, old, right? Like from...
like family cemeteries and things like that, or...
No, it's just they were the town cemeteries from like the 1800s or 1700s or whatever. And, I guarantee you those bones are gone. I mean, unless it was in a situation where it was buried very deep or whatever. But I think there's opportunities to bring some of these back at a minimum to turn it into a resource for that community. Rewild, educate, bring back natives, and have it be a public space. I'd love to reintroduce burials back in those, cemeteries. In an ideal world, I wouldn't want to necessarily start new cemeteries. I'd love to like take on all the abandoned ones. However, like that's a much bigger undertaking legislatively.
I would think so.
And so I'm going this route first. My whole thing is like, what's the fastest way for me to go get all the way to Z? And it's like the first step. Starting a new cemetery, unfortunately, is the easiest thing to do, because then you can generate kind of interest as well as the conversation, as well as the funding to go after some of these bigger changes.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you're not going to run out of opportunity anytime soon, as we're all going to eventually die, right? So
100%.
Yeah. So you cited, I saw on your, I think it was Instagram, you said something about how the demand for conservation burial cemeteries versus the actual availability is quite large. And you said the need is approximately 400 conservation burial cemeteries, but presently there are only 16 to 18. How did you calculate that gap number, that need number? And how do we close the gap? Is it people like you taking this initiative and trying to get these created, or?
So the number that I'm basing it on, so I explain conservation cemeteries because there's like, if you talk about green burial, there's different, shades of green, right? Like, there's the hybrid cemeteries where it's a conventional cemetery. They open a section where there's no embalming, no vaults. And then there's the natural cemetery, which is all green burial, but they don't necessarily have the relationship with a third-party land trust to conserve that land, in perpetuity. So I kind of describe conservation burial as equivalent to a home birth in the varying degrees of how natural you can do births. And I'm basing that gap number on the percentage of home births. I feel like it's a corollary where, about 20 years ago, the rate of home births was about 1%. And death industry lags by about 20 to 30 years, I would say, of all other trends. And so I'm using 1%, right? So if you think about, 1% of the US population dies on an annual basis. So out of 300 million, it's about 3 million people that are dying, of which if we have 1% of that number, choose conservation burial, and then just the geographic, necessity of having to be in various parts of the country is, I think, approximately how I got to 400. And the good thing is, like I mentioned before, there are more and more people interested in wanting to open them. It's just a slow process because every single one of them is like a grassroots, local kind of effort. There is an organization called the Conservation Burial Alliance, which provides resources as well as camaraderie and assistance to anyone that is interested in, starting a cemetery. So they're a huge resource and an advocate for all of us that are doing this.
What is from the general population? What is the response generally? Is it curiosity? Is it embracing it? Is there pushback? What's the vibe, generally speaking?
I would say people get it like instantly.
Really?
So
That's
yeah,
encouraging.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's okay. Let me kind of temper that a little bit. There's a handful of people that want nothing to do with a conversation about death, right?
Yeah.
And they'll just like change the conversation immediately.
Yes. Yes.
But of the people that are willing to like step into 2 minutes of that conversation or whatever, they just instantly get it.
Okay.
The majority of responses I get have been, oh, I want to be a tree, I want to be wildflowers. They love the idea
Yeah.
because I think all of us kind of innately understand that we're just these organic forms that are this just for now, and
Right.
we'll morph into something else. And I think that appeals to people.
Right.
Um, and
So,
so it's been positive.
in terms of identifying the property
Yes.
that you ultimately want to have, what are what sort of criteria goes into finding that piece of land, and then affording that piece of land?
Yeah. Um, I am learning more about soil than I ever thought I would ever know. Fortunately, there are a lot of public resources for initial research for that
Okay.
kind of stuff. But basically, it's like three main things related to the soil. It's the permeability, it's the depth of a restrictive layer like bedrock, and then it's the water tables. And so
Okay.
um, you want those latter two things to be as deep as possible, and then
Yep.
permeability to be relatively permeable, right? And
Okay.
so looking for just like the right profile of soil. I used to kind of hold out for like the most perfect profile, but then I've kind of come around to we've been dying everywhere for thousands and thousands of years. Like
Hmm.
we can't beat that. Like precious about
Yeah. Yeah.
like when I visited Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery down in Florida, they're burying people in sand, and that's just Florida, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so um, you work with what you have. And
Mhm.
so within what we have in the Hudson Valley, which is relatively rocky, relatively, spots of marshy, you're just looking for the best profile out of what's
Okay.
available.
Okay. And like how big of a piece of land are you looking to purchase?
Yeah. So there's basically two models that so I did this whole like analysis of, looking at 50 miles out and then 100 miles out of any
Hmm.
particular location, and assuming like 1% of the population within 50 miles and maybe 0.5% outside of, 50 to 100 miles.
Okay.
And have come to the conclusion, with the grave renewal and all of that, that ideally it would be in the 1 to 200 acre range
Okay.
that would make it self-sustaining for sustaining that kind of a burial rate.
Hmm.
Um, everything is very like mathy with
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do, because you have to kind
Yeah.
of like you have to be responsible with what you
Yes.
ultimately end up doing. And so whether
Yeah.
that's one location that's the 100 to 200 acres, or
Okay.
it's two or three locations, because there's something to be said for having resources, much closer to where people live.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'd rather in some ways have, three different 50-acre locations in three different counties than necessarily all of that acreage in one place. Having said that, it's been really interesting to watch Larkspur and other conservation cemeteries at work, because with the profits, they're reinvesting back into land conservation. So Larkspur,
Hmm.
for example, buries probably in about 100 acres or so, but
Hmm.
they've conserved over 800. And
Hmm.
so it's really encouraging to just see kind of like these front runners, or the forerunners, I guess,
Yeah.
show the way in continued impact that they can have, even if it's not all just cemetery land.
Yeah. So where are you quite literally in this process? Like, do you have some funds raised so far? Have you not even entered that portion of it? You want to identify the land first? Like where
Yeah.
are you at right now, and kind of what are the steps to actually achieving that?
Yeah. I received my 501(c)(3) in December.
Which I
And
saw.
so
Congrats. That's amazing.
thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, last year was a funky year trying to trying to get anything through the IRS because it had like shut down
Yeah.
multiple
Yes.
times
I
throughout
can
the
only
year.
imagine.
Yeah, I kept calling them to make sure they were there, you know. um, and so we're relatively early in our fundraising. We've gotten some amazing friends that have donated, you know, because they believe in the project.
Yeah.
We're in the process of, you know, submitting grant, you know, requests to various foundations. I've been working with a pretty prominent land trust in the area. And
Nice.
so we initially looked at land they already had within their portfolio that they hadn't yet turned into a public park or anything like that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any of those work because of the soil profile and
I gotcha.
some of the other things that I mentioned. And so right now, this part has been really exciting where we've been looking at some of the land that they've conserved and the surrounding properties that they would be interested in adding to the total conservation
Nice.
within a particular region, because you know you can really extend the impact by having multiple lots conserved together. And so knock on wood, one of the ones that we've been talking about, we're having an appraiser come out later this week to see if we can start the process to.
Oh, nice. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a 70-acre property. It's got views of the Hudson River. It's, you know, from like one portion of the property. It's really nice. But yeah, fundraising is going to be name of the game once that if that ball starts rolling. I think I kind of went between like, if we have the property identified, can show pictures, can show, you know, just like land use, future state, you know, images, it might be easier to do the fundraising. But then on the flip side, it would really be nice to have someone in my back pocket, which I don't have yet. So
yeah.
So yeah.
And you've got like a tiny but mighty crew of how many you're working with?
It's myself and 4 other people. Yeah, tiny and mighty for sure. In
wearing
some
all
ways,
the
yeah, like wearing every hat necessary.
Yeah.
You know, of which a large component of it is just keeping my spirits up. Because you know, a piece of land will fall through, and you know, I'll be devastated for like 2 weeks, and you know, they're like, no, okay, like we're gonna keep going. So, yeah.
So do you think that people are actively looking for an alternative to traditional burial and traditional end-of-life options? And if so, why do you think that is?
It's a good question. I don't know that people are actively looking, because I don't know that people are actively encouraged to think about death. And so of the people that have thought about it, it's been interesting, because you have a generation of baby boomers who are told that cremation was the greenest option. And so when I try to have this particular conversation with them, they're just like, wait, but like, I thought I already chose the green thing. And I'm just like, I know, like, however,
you're wrong.
I mean, you know, this is a newer,
be re-educated.
Yeah. So that's somewhat challenging. It's been encouraging when it's a relatively new topic to people, and it's kind of the first time they're thinking about it, and it just, like I mentioned earlier, it just like clicks for people, right? That why wouldn't you go back to the earth and feed it? And so
if you have 15 seconds with somebody in an elevator to make your pitch for why this is the way to go when your life is over, what do you say?
I would say there's a holistic way for you to make a decision to leave this life in the way that you've lived it, and to make choices where you're showing that you care about the place where you've lived.
Okay. So 20 years from now, what is your vision? What do you see for the work that you're doing?
I would love to have our first location to be up and running in about 5 years.
Okay.
And then that be so wildly successful, and we have, really begun changing the minds of others, that within the following 5 years that we would have likely started on the second and the third locations. And so 20 years from now, I'd love conservation burial to be something that is an available resource to people so that they can choose it without having to say, hey, like right now, if someone wanted it in New York, they would have to go, probably 5 hours from where they're living, in which case, like, is that the most ecological thing anymore, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, I'd love it to be available, to everybody in the whole country.
So if somebody's curious about learning more about conservation burial and the environmental impacts or lack thereof, ecological benefits, all of that, what are the top resources that somebody can turn to?
So you can look on our website. So we're Aeon Woods, AEON The Conservation Burial Alliance, like I mentioned before, is a great resource with lots of kind of like the infographics and the digestible scientific information, as well as a listing of all of the conservation burial grounds throughout the country, probably some in Canada as well, listed on there.
Okay. All right. So I have two last questions, and they're ones that I ask everybody. Since you have been working in this specific space, what has been the single most impactful or transformative experience that you've had?
What they say about really appreciating life is true, right? I think that's true with anyone that's working close to death.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've woken up. This is the first year I've lived in New York all of my adult life, and this is the first year I've gone to the Tribeca Film Festival. I just got tickets to Carnegie Music Hall, like all this stuff. Like I just like
Yeah.
never bothered to do, right?
Yeah. Did you see Death Boom
I
at
did.
Tribeca?
So
Did
that
you?
was
Was it
the
amazing?
reason that I went. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't. The trailer seemed a little sensational, but and it's Eli Roth, so there was
Yeah.
definitely kind of a little bit of flair,
Yeah.
but it was well researched, and it laid out all the options really well. It was entertaining.
Yeah.
It was done well.
Right on.
I'm
Sorry, I didn't mean to
hoping.
interrupt.
Yeah, no. I'm hoping that it shows up on everyone's like Netflix feeds or whatever, and everyone watches it and
Yeah.
has a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah.
And then second question, are you afraid to die? Why or why not?
Yeah, I guess yes, and I have two kids. I have two teenage girls. I'd love to not die so I can continue to know them as they
Yeah.
grow
Yeah. Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yep.
But when I do die, I plan on coming back and haunting everybody to make sure that they stay entertained and connected.
Okay.
Um, not that I hardcore believe in any particular dogma or
Yeah.
whatever, but
Yeah.
I think there's some version of something that
Yeah.
is always around. So
Totally.
yeah.
Well, HK, thank you so much. This has been very enlightening. Listeners, I will drop all URLs and social handles and links to the resources provided in the show notes. And I just can't thank you enough. And I wish you all the best with the future of Aeon Woods.
Thank you so much, Ashley. This was a delight.
If you like this episode of Dying to Know More, be sure to like and subscribe to never miss another episode.